let me tell you something. When we decided to launch the second Women Inclusion Forum, I made a special call. I called Deborah Moskowitz. Deborah, she's the managing partner for Quintairos, Prieto, Wood, and Boyer. This law firm, and pay close attention to this law firm is the largest minority and women owned law firm in the United States of America. And Deborah, she's the managing partner in the Orlando office. Deborah, thank you for accepting our invitation as a partner. You are a rock star.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and it's an honor to be here and to participate in this amazing forum. It is an absolute pleasure to be here.
Well, Deborah, we have had so many conversations on this topic and the topic of sexual harassment. And we were talking the other day about a major class action lawsuit that is going right now in Central Florida. And we are talking about a $500 million class action lawsuit. Let me ask you, Deborah, what kind of trends are you seeing now in cases involving sexual harassment and retaliation?
We are definitely seeing an uptick of these types of cases during the pandemic, and a lot of amazing things are happening for women that we need to embrace and continue. Flexibility, all of these things that you talked about that are extraordinarily important, that allow women to be able to work remotely, still take care of their families and do things that are important to them, but not lose their place in the workforce. But a lot of these, remote things have other issues that may arise that companies need to be aware of to be able to take care of and watch over, to protect their female talent. And we are seeing an increase in, there are, before COVID, you would have middle level management or even upper level management that would travel to various locations of their companies to communicate with all of their staff, to make sure that everybody's doing okay, and that there was a direct line of communication to leadership if there were any problems that needed to be addressed. With travel bans that are in place, whether it is a corporate policy that's been put in place, or there's a government travel ban that's been put in place, we're seeing that there have been some issues where there are some positions that require for that particular job to occur that it be on site and not remote. And some bad apples are not being supervised and feel that they can get away with poor treatment of female employees, that they might feel that they were going to get caught if they tried that stuff before. We're also seeing a number of cases that are filed, and this is something that companies really need to be very careful about. When dealing with remote work and other issues, especially that we've all had to pivot to do very quickly during this pandemic, is it extraordinarily important to make sure that the policies that you're putting in place as a company are not having a disproportionate impact on your women talent. And we're seeing a number of cases that are filed in that space as well. So there's definitely an uptick in cases, and discrimination is definitely on the radar screen of the EEOC, and we're seeing action being taken on the agency's part, as well as by private attorneys.
Very interesting. And let me ask you, based on that, have you seen any recent decisions that our audience need to know about? Absolutely.
I am a huge proponent, and I certainly hope that everyone and all of the businesses that are present on this call take advantage of the tools that are available to them, because frankly speaking, these issues are far cheaper to fix on the front end than when you have to get an attorney or attorneys involved to fix it on the back end. There's a recent decision that actually a settlement that happened right here in Orlando within the last week involving O'Reilly Automotive Stores. And in this particular case, there were 3 women who were doing work for a location here in Orlando. And there was a supervisor that was unfortunately speaking to them and making sexual demands and touching them inappropriately. These were the allegations that were made. And the employees reported this to management, but there were not, the allegations in the complaint were that once these ladies had made allegations of mistreatment, they were being sent home, they were being written up, and the alleged bad behavior continued. It was also alleged in this complaint that the employees brought this to the knowledge of the corporate office, and that they alleged that they made calls to the company hotline to advise that this treatment was going on. And the charging party alleged that she quit her job due to the continued treatment that she was receiving. And one of the allegations in the complaint was that the offending party was actually being called upon to witness when she was being spoken to and provided with constructive criticism of her own activity at work. That settlement was $165,000 being paid by the company, in addition to, I'm sure, significant legal fees. But even more interesting, in addition to the funds that are being paid as part of the settlement, the company has to update its policies and procedures, train its employees. They are going to have multiple trainings of their management as to these types of issues of sexual harassment and retaliation. And they are going to have to keep notes of any and all calls made to their hotline that have anything to do with a sexual related complaint. And these complaints all have to now be reported to the EEOC over a 2.5-year period. And that they are going to have to justify their reactions to these complaints and keep the EEOC apprised of what's being done to address them if there are further complaints in the future. So this is certainly something that will have an impact on this business moving forward, because they are going to have to essentially deal directly with a large government agency, in addition to doing their jobs and trying to make their business grow. And there are a number of things that could have been done to address this in a way that hopefully would have been able to make this much less expensive for the company, and to certainly keep, in this particular circumstance, 3 employees feeling that they were not being not valued by their company.
It's very interesting, because now they have to go through this lengthy process. They also need to work internally when it comes to the engagement of their people, but also their ability to attract the best talent diminishes, because all this information, when you Google it, it's right there. So if I'm looking to work for a company and I do some Google search or Bing search on that organization, I'm going to find this. And probably I'm going to feel deterred from even trying to apply for this organization. So companies sometimes I think, okay, I'm working with this internally. Just remember that all this information is out there. Just, people just have to Bing for it or Google for it, and it's right there. Let me ask you, we already saw how women feel when it comes to training in their organizations, when it comes to sexual harassment. What else do you suggest companies should do in order to prevent these kind of situations?
Well, it is critical that, I can't sing the praises of training enough. It is extraordinarily important that leadership from the top down instills that this is an important part of the corporate culture of the organization, that this type of behavior won't be tolerated. And there needs to be finite policies and procedures put into place that specifically delineate what type of behavior is not going to be tolerated. And then, frankly speaking, if that type of behavior is occurring, it needs to be dealt with swiftly. It needs to be dealt with the same way across the board. I find, a lot of times people or, companies sometimes feel that, oh, geez, this person's a really productive part of our company. They didn't mean it. And that all may be true. But it's really important to make sure that you are enforcing your rules equally across the board, so that, if somebody, and certainly not every thing that is offensive or inappropriate to one person, it may not be considered to be inappropriate to somebody else. So it's really important to have that training so that there's no question in your employees' minds as far as what is appropriate, what is not appropriate, what we are going to, allow, what we're not going to allow. Then the other things that are really important is if you get a complaint, act quickly on it. Make sure that you are not taking an extraordinary amount of time in order to investigate a complaint. Make sure that your documentation is in order, detailing the investigation that you took and the factual findings that were made. Make sure that if you are able to do so, that you keep the investigations confidential, because you don't want to be doing something that essentially victimizes someone twice. Be very, very careful also. One of the things, and this is something that I touched on a little bit earlier, that is extraordinarily important, especially during the times that we all find ourselves in now. It is critical to make sure that you are not setting policies for your company that have the unintended consequence of being more impactful on women than men. And, whether, things are sort of changing and there are a lot more men who are stepping up to the plate, who are providing childcare or handling other things that are necessary in the home. But, the studies show us that women are still, in most cases, responsible for most of the childcare. If you are having, if you're setting hours for remote work, are you setting hours across the board just because you have to do it in that fashion? Are you able to allow your female talent to work different hours to accommodate their being able to assist kids who are having to also now be teachers because kids are not able to attend school? You essentially want to make sure that you're not setting policies that have an unintended consequence of having a more negative impact on your female talent, if at all possible. Also important, for issues that may arise, since you have many employees who are working remotely these days, and you touched upon it in your presentation as well, and it's critical. Do not let someone being out of your sight mean that they're out of your mind. Make sure that you are checking in on your employees. Make sure that employees have a direct line of communication to management. Make sure that you are speaking with your folks in order to make sure that they're getting the critical feedback that they need to keep their performance where it needs to be, and make sure that you are recognizing the productivity of people who are remote, so that you are not getting in a position where you may run afoul of an equal pay charge, which is certainly the issue of the day also that we're seeing.
Wow. When you get a complaint, act quickly. That's key.
Yes.
And another key factor that you were talking about, and I have seen it, is that I've heard companies saying, hey, I cannot remove this leader because he represents 61% of the sales. Well, if you would have had a strong succession plan, if you would have had a strong pipeline where you have in every single line women and men already trained, you wouldn't have that situation. And that's exactly basically the same situation that this company that I spoke about, the one that is facing the $500 million lawsuit, that was one of their situations or their problems. In their case, they ended up firing the CEO. And after they fired their CEO, they sued their CEO. So at the end of the day, they could have prevented it, but at the end of the day, they act in a way that it helped diminish the impact somehow on their reputation. Deborah, there are laws running back and forth. There's always something going on. It's impossible for HR leaders and company leaders and business leaders to know what's going on and be up to date. When it comes to legislation, what do you see in the horizon? What changes do you think or do you see are going to be happening anytime soon?
Well, it's a major focus of this administration and the agencies that report to it to address equal pay for women. And while equal pay for women has been the law since the 60s, we all know that that's not necessarily the case, because there are a multitude of exceptions, if you will, that were in place in the original Equal Pay Act that essentially allowed employers to have documented or approved excuses in order to pay women candidates less. I expect that we will see a push within this year, probably the next year, for modification of the Equal Pay Act in order to address certain things, such as not allowing companies to look at the prior salary history of candidates in order to set what their the pay will be for a particular position. There are a number of issues as far as merit and seniority that are currently in place that allow for candidates to have different salaries if someone meets that exception. So I believe that we're probably going to see attempts at legislation that will close some of those loopholes, if you will, to try and get us from essentially half of the workforce to be instead of 82% to be as close to that 100% of our counterparts as we possibly can be.
Well, Deborah, Thank you again for jumping in as soon as I called you. You have been a wonderful partner. I invite everyone to connect with her in LinkedIn and also follow Quintairos, Prieto, Wood, and Boyer. They have been a wonderful partner on this second Women Inclusion Forum.
Thank you again. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I'm so honored, as is the firm, to be involved with this great cause.